I love hearing your story because I've heard a little bit. What were you doing before you got into real estate?
So, I was in college when I first got into it. One of my best friends, his dad is a property manager and also investor in real estate. Taught us a little bit about...
Jake Stein built a real estate empire before the age of 30 as a bold and visionary entrepreneur.
He carved a path through real estate's toughest terrain, cold calling strangers, flipping land, and mastering multi-tenant industrial deals.
I have this very obsessive personality that when I have something in my mind that I want to do, it's essentially all I focus on.
How much money were you making on each one of those deals?
What's up, Rounders? Welcome to the Real Estate Boyz radio show and podcast. This is Andrew Jobe. I am one of your hosts, joined by Mr. J.R. Reed. How you doing, J.R.?
Doing great, man.
It's been a good week.
It's been a great week.
I'm excited for today. Kind of ending the week strong. Have an amazing guest today.
One of my favorite people.
Really?
One of my favorite people.
I didn't know that.
He is, absolutely. So we have none other than Jake Stein, who probably has one of the most unique stories I know about in real estate as far as here in Houston. I don't know everybody in real estate, but as far as the people I know in our sphere in Houston, Jake is an expert in multi-tenant industrial, which is also known as flex space, and then single-tenant land storage. Did I say that right?
Industrial outdoor storage.
Outdoor storage.
Yeah.
Man, I totally bombed that.
Okay.
No, you got the first part really good.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he is the expert in this, and whenever I have or we have a warehouse deal or a multi-tenant industrial deal, I always call him up, and then he tells me how bad off I am on my numbers.
Why are you even
He's
looking at this?
Why are you even looking at this? And so this is the guy that I go to when it comes to these things. So welcome to the show, man.
Appreciate you guys having me. Making me feel special here.
You are special.
Someone willing to hear all my stories as well. So I'm looking forward to talking real estate.
It's going to be fun. Well, man, I think the best place to start off is to tell us how you got into what you're doing. And I love hearing your story because I've heard a little bit before in the past. And so
Sure.
What were you doing before you got into real estate?
So, I was in college when I first got into it. So one of my friends growing up, one of my best friends, his dad is a property manager and also investor in real estate. So he, taught us a little bit about, high level, going and finding deals, where to go. Gave us some of the clues, if you will. But at the time, I was in school, and then in the summer, I was working an internship, and I went to UT, studied finance, and was planning on doing investment banking. And frankly, I didn't have a shot at being an investment banker. I mean, I had one interview after another, and I mean, it was to the point where I was like, why am I even still showing up for these? So I got the idea that investment banking was not my calling.
What makes you say that? Like they weren't hiring you? Or?
Well, one, they weren't hiring me, but two, I was trying to find positions that were somewhat like that of an investment banker. So I did a wealth management internship, and I had a guy who had a military background who was the one above me. And if you know me well, that's not the guy that you want me reporting to. I mean, I'm all over the place. I'm not organized. And he'd say, put together paperwork and stuff in this sequence, and I'd return it to him in complete opposite sequence. And so I knew pretty early on that was not my calling. And so I started to really study real estate and try to figure out my avenue into it. And so, I was cold calling and, trying to find deals that way.
So you got the idea from your buddy's dad, like how to cold call?
Well, I got the idea to go find real estate in these areas by whatever means necessary.
Okay.
So whether it's door knocking, cold calling. I mean, when I say cold calling, I should refine that. I was calling realtor listings.
Okay.
And I had no idea how I even fit in the real estate landscape at that point.
You're just calling and talking to people.
Calling listings, and they'd tell me what they were asking, and I'd get off the phone, and I was, what was the point of that call afterward? So I started to really refine my process, I should say, so what I ended up doing was putting up those signs, the bandit signs, where to start building your buyer base.
Jake buys houses.
Well, no, it was more like 5,000 square foot lot for sale for $10,000, and the 5,000 square foot lot did not exist. So people would just start calling me buyers, and So I started building up, a list of people who were looking to buy property. And at that point, I was then looking while I was in college to find deals here. So I started looking for land, putting together, using LandGlide to just screenshot all the available pieces of land, houses that were run down, and was essentially just putting together lists, going back to UT, cold calling them, getting things under contract and flipping them.
So were you getting things under contract here in Houston or in Austin?
Yeah, getting things under contract in Houston. And
while you're going to school at UT?
While I was going to school at UT. And I was doing everything. I mean, I was door knocking, cold calling. I even have like one very clear, it was a disaster, but I knocked on this door and this wasp came down at the wrong time. So the wasp, I knocked on the door.
Like a bee wasp?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was multiple actually. So I knocked on the door. These wasps came down. I ran to my car. So I ran to
right when you knocked on the door?
I ran to my car, yeah.
It was like what do they call it? Ding dong ditch or whatever.
So that's what it turned into. I got in my car, then the guy came out, and then he locked eyes with me. So I had two choices. I could either explain to him that the wasps came down or just gun the car. So I gunned the car. I can go back down the street. So
that guy probably still thinks about that to this day.
Yeah,
of like, what was that guy doing?
So I was really doing, cold calling myself, door knocking, everything to get deals together. Every single deal I did, the maximum that I made was $3,000 every deal. And that was very much like a self-imposed, metric as to what I thought I should be making.
Where did the $3,000 come from?
I think my one buyer, that's probably where it started. But
I'll pay you $3,000 for any deal.
Well, I mean, it always, he always wanted to know what I got it for, and of course, I didn't know that what a double close was, and so I knew he would see it anyway, so I would share it. So I was always making like the same amount. And
but as a college kid, $3,000 isn't bad.
Yeah, and I was really looking at it like, what I would be making coming out of college, which at the time I was trying to make like, somewhere in that 60 to 70 range coming out of college, if I were to go if everything went right for me, if I got the investment banking job, if I was, which I didn't really think I could get either. So I started looking, I was thinking, how many of these deals do I have to do to get close to what I would make, if I went that route? So that was the math I kind of played around with in my head, continued going down that path.
So when you graduated, you didn't get a job?
No. So when I was in college, it started with just me doing it. And then I started hiring people overseas while I was in college. Okay. Which at the time was still relatively new. There wasn't as much cold calling as there is now. So it was more effective.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any managerial experience, and I started building a team in Nicaragua. And I had one guy, I basically built a team of people who they lived in the U.S. for extended periods of time, and then for one reason or another ended up back in their home countries. So they spoke perfect English, and it was very much like a referral system to the point where I had like random people in Nicaragua reaching out to my WhatsApp asking me for jobs.
Nice.
So but that was a really effective way of getting, much more exposure to the marketplace. I appointed one guy as his name is Moses, as like the acquisitions guy and dispositions guy. And so he, for all intents and purposes, was like running my wholesaling
while you're in school.
While I was in school, yeah.
Doesn't sound like you were going on 6th Street very much while you're in.
No, so I was cold calling a ton myself, and then also having this going on, and my friends would make fun of me because I'd be in my room cold calling, and they'd be watching football on Sundays. So
that's awesome.
But
where are your friends now, right?
Yeah, I mean they're all doing their own things, and but I'm glad I did what I did on Sundays.
What was the personal drive that said, this is what I want to spend my time doing? What was the thing that you were chasing at that time that said, I'm going to sacrifice kind of some of the social aspects of school and focus on this real estate thing?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it didn't feel like sacrifice. It felt like what I wanted to do more than anything. Like I have this very obsessive personality that when I have something in my mind that I want to do, it's essentially all I focus on. to a detriment, like to a point where I have to catch myself. Like I, even my apartment that I live in now, when my sisters came to visit me and I said, like make yourselves at home. I said something like that. And they're like, you don't have a couch, you don't have chairs, and all you have is 2 waters in the fridge. And I'm like, but you should see the deal I'm working on right now. It's like, so
make yourself at home. And there's no place to
right.
sit.
So it's like I really, when I'm focused on something, it's what I. So
you just didn't even know that you're.
It didn't feel like a sacrifice.
Yeah, it didn't feel like a sacrifice. You didn't even know that your apartment didn't even have furniture.
Right. And in college, it didn't feel like a sacrifice either. It was, I got obsessed with it, and I wanted to grow, and I wanted to, learn more and expand. And
I love that. That's awesome, man. So it sounds like it all started with your buddy's dad.
Yeah.
Who got you kind of like this idea in real estate, and then you just were like, this is awesome and fun. Yeah,
so I was actually thinking about that before coming here, the people that have been really influential, and I've had a lot of people that have helped me along the way. Three people that I can really, trace down to having profound impacts on what I've, done. And oddly enough, these people they weren't even friends growing. Well, okay, with the exception of my friend's dad, these other 2 were people I didn't even know, just, effectively strangers. So my friend's dad was the first one.
What's your friend's dad's name?
Yossi.
Yossi, okay.
Yeah, great guy, and someone I'm still, run deals by. And the second is a guy named Laird, who I met cold calling. So I cold called him on a warehouse, and he said he didn't want to sell it. So then I called him again. He said the same thing. I called him, probably half a dozen more times with the same answer. And then eventually he said, you keep calling me, and this clearly isn't working, but, I'm looking for more deals, and I'm happy to, you sound young, you sound ambitious. Like, I'm happy to help you grow. And, if there's a way I can fit in a deal that you find that's not my property, I'm happy to help out, as I can. So I ended up coming across, and this was my first really bigger deal, I would say, a 53,000 square foot warehouse, which was vacant. Nice. And I didn't have any way to finance it, or, I didn't even know where to start. And so I called him and I said, I have this deal. It's a really good price. It's off market. Can you essentially lend me the money? And he did. He lent me the entirety of it. Wow. And
just off a cold call?
Off a cold call. Yeah, I met him cold calling. Right. He became my first private lender, and a friendly private lender at that. So that deal very much pivoted what I thought I could do and the trajectory of my business.
I love it. Before we get too far in the weeds, let's go back. Okay, so your first deal while you were in college. Let's talk about your first deal.
Sure. First deal was actually a $49,000 house on Holman.
Nice.
And that deal, people kept breaking into it while I was trying to sell it, which was a whole nother thing. So I realized there's more to it than just real estate. There's a lot of moving pieces. There are a lot of variables, and frankly, the more things you can control, the better, which is why I pivoted to land pretty quickly. So after that, I ended up selling that, and so made a little bit of money on that house, pivoted to land, and that's really where I focused my efforts, really because people make houses seem really easy. To me, they're pretty complicated. You got a lot of moving pieces, especially if you're, in Austin trying to do it. You don't have to see anything with the house. You're just looking at a piece of land. So started flipping land, and then started doing exactly what you probably never should do, which is buying land with hard money loans.
Okay.
So that's what I was doing.
You're literally buying land.
I was buying land with hard money loans, which is really the recipe for massive failure. But I was buying things at a really good price. And then I was flipping stuff to essentially pay the interest and, make some money in the process. But, it became clear that I needed to own things as well, which is what kind of led me to that, buy money with, or buy land with hard money, which started going down that path.
What was the goal in doing that? Were you just buying it so cheap that you're like, I'm going to close on it and then list it?
No, to hold.
To hold. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could tell you my like game plan. It probably wasn't that great. It just was an idea, and it was like I see these other guys that are just buying it and holding it. Like, why can't I be one of them?
Okay.
And so that's what I started doing. Buying land, and I didn't think about like I'm paying 11% interest. So like even if this thing goes up 11% a year, it's a wash. But anyways, but I was buying land. And
You were doing it.
I was doing it.
You were real estate.
I had stuff that I owned, and I felt good about it.
Yeah.
I was moving in that direction, building a portfolio. I think that was my goal really from the start, was to figure out a way to build a portfolio. And so then I started actually, seeing it and seeing the blueprint, and seeing myself as having a real estate company as opposed to just being kind of like, flipping stuff to companies. And so, trying to go through the chronology, but I had my first warehouse deal that I bought, which was 4,000 square feet. And I bought it entirely with private money. And it was a private lender that I met through a realtor friend of mine. She introduced me to one of her clients that, kind of did private lending there. And so I bought this warehouse and I bought it for $100,000, then put a tenant in there. But then I couldn't refinance because I wasn't even I wasn't bankable at the time.
What do you mean by when you say bankable? What do you mean?
I was a bank's worst nightmare. I had a broker like look at my balance sheet. He was like, "You realize like you own pretty much all the land, and you have hard money loans on all these pieces of land. Like, this is not what you. This is like the opposite of what you want.
You're fully levered,
right? You're fully levered with stuff like, and none of it produces any sort of income. So it's like you're jumping into a lake with like anchors on your legs. So I started to pivot, and fortunately, I had an avenue for pivoting, which was industrial. And so the market, started going in my favor. The land went up, and I started doing 1031s essentially into warehouses. And that was really, my transition from land to ownership was, moving, getting into holding industrial, and at the same time maintaining this flipping and wholesaling business.
How many land deals do you think you did, and how long were you doing land before you pivoted to?
So I was doing
industrial.
I was doing them simultaneously for a while. I made probably 760 pieces of land, 770, somewhere in that range.
Okay. So 60, 70 deals.
Yeah, land deals, which I held for short periods of time, or held for a year, or flipped right away. Just kind of a blend of all those. But what I started doing was focusing on bigger tracts of land to flip. And so I started doing double closes with those bigger tracts of land, which, led me to do, the buyer and the seller couldn't see what I was making. And so I was able to start, making my spreads larger and focusing a little more. And so in that process, I ended up learning a lot about people who were buying the land from me. And that's what really led me to industrial outdoor storage. One of the guys who I was flipping, acreage to was developing it and leasing it for that use. So, a big part of the learning curve for me with all this has been, kind of just a real life scavenger hunt, and just kind of taking pieces from, people I meet and people I sell to and people I buy from, people I cold call, and just trying to learn and put together, what I can.
Pieces from it.
Pieces, yeah.
So you go from doing, it sounds like we were wholesaling houses first, or you were wholesaling houses first.
Yeah.
And then you go from houses and you're like, well, screw this house thing because it's too complicated because I'm in Austin and I'm doing this in Houston.
Yeah.
And then you go to land.
Yeah.
And so you were in college doing land, and then you graduate college and you're still doing land?
Here, yeah, still doing land, still doing warehouses. And say buying warehouses. And the thing is that the warehouses, they were cash flow positive, but not to a point to where I had a massive cash flow business.
Yeah. And
I was still dependent on the flips, and then I was still dependent on this overseas talent, which it was more of a lottery ticket than anything, because I became really unorganized, and I was just the more I made, the more I spent marketing. So I was just kind of throwing things at the wall and scratching off the tickets and waiting in my office for like something remotely symbolic of a deal to appear so that I could flip it, hopefully, and make enough to offset the marketing costs and some. But what ended up happening was the guy that I was using overseas who was doing acquisition and disposition ended up stealing deals from me. So there was a realtor in Houston who I won't name, but he was essentially giving him my deals and splitting the profits 50-50 with him.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like sitting in my office. I have these massive like marketing bills. I'm like, where are the deals? You know, and he's giving me these sob stories about it's tough right now. Like sellers don't want to sell. Like, and I mean, this guy's having record months in Nicaragua. You know, so I'm over here, but
he's selling all the deals to this.
Right. So you know, and it was my fault too. I wasn't organized enough with it. I wasn't a good wholesaler. I'm a deal guy. So I would grab onto anything that was a deal and try to make the most possible out of it and optimize it. But from like a volume and operation standpoint, I wasn't running a good operation. So I learned about seller financing and thought, you know, my idea with that was not to build out a massive seller finance business. It was to do enough seller finance deals to where I wouldn't have to worry about wholesaling for income.
Okay. When you say seller financing, like what kind of deals are you talking about?
So it's buying houses, fixing them up, and then essentially seller financing them to borrowers that, you know, don't qualify for conventional bank financing.
Okay.
And so I'd buy them with private money, fix them up with private money, have them for sale, you know, with the private money in place. And once I found a buyer, I had a note receivable lender and bank, you know, essentially bringing that funding to the closing table to then pay off the first lien.
Gotcha.
So it turned into a note receivable deal.
Okay.
So I'm essentially taking the spread between the borrower who's paying me and then my payment to the bank. And the bank's collateral is my position in the note.
Nice.
So I did about 13 of those, which I still have. And that was, you know, I say that it took up a lot of time. And, you know, each deal, there wasn't a big payday when I sold it because I was essentially just creating a note.
Yeah, where you get paid every month off.
Right. So it's, you know, it's an annuity and it set me up for, so I did 13 of those and then I did 13 of those and then, so the third important person in my life, David Ebro, he has a company that does really large industrial developments. And
hold on, let's go back before you get to him. Let's focus on this owner financing for a little while because these are pretty interesting.
Sure.
So you do these 13 deals, and your mindset going into doing these owner finance deals was what? When you're like, I'm going to go create notes. Like, what was your mindset?
My mindset was, I kind of fast forwarded through like a few single family, you know, Burra deals that I, you know, bought and then refinanced when interest rates were low and it made sense. In those deals, even the ones that I did, you know, in quote perfectly, the AC would break, the roof would, you know, there'd be holes in the roof, like tenant would get mad at me and then punch holes in the wall, like, you know, just all these like random things that I realized there wasn't cash flow there.
Yeah, there's no cash flows in single family rentals.
Correct, and I didn't know what I could do to change that either. So, you know, I was just focused on the idea of creating legitimate cash flow and freeing up my time to do something else or chase something bigger.
Okay. So you knew you wanted to go bigger.
I knew I wanted to go bigger. I didn't know what the asset was. Actually, like during that time period, I got like a 35 unit apartment under contract and you know, I had no bid. I mean, it was a good deal. I ended up flipping it, but it wasn't a fit for me and what
you didn't want to own the 35 unit apartment complex.
Right.
And so you ended up selling it and making a good profit.
I flipped it. So I was just going through this period of like chasing bigger assets, but not really sure exactly what it was that I wanted to do.
So the owner finance was the way to get your cash flow right.
Correct.
How much money were you making on each one of those deals?
So, I mean, it depends on the deal and how much equity, but somewhere between 600 and 800 per deal.
Okay. Per month.
Yeah.
That's a great annuity.
Yeah. So, and I was also doing So I was doing interest only on a lot of them, interest only on the note receivable, and then 30-year AM with the borrower. Okay. So I get a little bit of a bump in the cash flow just because they were paying principal.
Yep.
And not that you want to count on that, but just for the sake of like getting legitimate cash flow coming in, that was helpful.
So do you have to refinance those notes on the back end at some point, or?
So they're 5-year notes.
Okay.
So, essentially the borrower is paying it down, and then, my note receivable loans are being paid down simultaneously.
Got you.
I did some that are interest only, but, the majority of them now are, I have 30-year AM as well.
Oh, nice.
So.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's fun.
And I found a private lender that essentially was more flexible than the bank to do the note receivable loans. So I ended up just doing them through him.
That's a great person to know.
Yeah.
How did you meet that person?
So he came from Laird, one of Laird's friends. Laird's the guy that I essentially cold called, and
nice.
He introduced me to one of his other buddies. Laird's like 75 years old. So Laird's at a different point of his life, and so he's just focused on, creating passive income they didn't have to worry about.
For sure. That's awesome. We're going to take a quick break right here
Sure.
so we can hear a message from our sponsor and then get back into it on the backside.
Great.
Welcome back, Rounders. Sitting here with Mr. Jake, learning about everything under the sun, really. I mean, wholesaling, flipping land, owner finance notes, now starting to get into like the real steak and potatoes.
The multi-tenant industrial, the single-tenant outdoor storage.
The sexy stuff.
I did it. I got it.
Yeah.
You're a professional now.
Almost. It only took 20 podcasts or 100 podcasts. Cool. So you were talking about Laird hooked you up with this guy who's now who was your note receivable guy.
Yeah. So Laird was the second person I mentioned, and I'll get into the third here, which who also came from a cold call. And so this was kind of in my phase of, looking to get into, bigger assets, but not exactly sure what I wanted to get into. So there's this huge piece of land right on the corner of 610 and Scott, or 610 and Colon, somewhere there. I guess 7-acre tract of land, which I had no business buying, nor did I have any idea what I would do with it. But
you just saw an empty piece of land.
I just saw an empty piece of land with a sign on it, and so I called the sign. And I left a voicemail. They ended up calling me back, and long story short, I was connected with the guy who owns that company. It's a development company, and they were essentially they planned on building a big industrial site there, which they did. I didn't do anything with that property, but I met David, who owns the company and owns that property, and so I had lunch with him. And a very entrepreneurial guy, very much, I think, saw some of himself in, like, me when he was younger, and, like, a lot of the same energy and spirit. So I had lunch with him a few times, told him about what I was doing, how I was deal sourcing, cold calling, etc. And he said, well, I don't know exactly how I fit into your puzzle here, but I have an office, and, like, I'd like for you to come move into my office and, like, organically see what comes of this. And at the time, so I have an office in Rice Village, nothing special, small office. It's been fine for me for a while now. And I felt like I was doing something with the seller finance notes. So in some way I did have a level of like confidence that I didn't want to just go move into like a random person's office building with his company and act like a nomad for a little while. So but I decided like I really wanted to get to that next lily pad. I didn't really know what was there, but I felt like I was at least trying to feel around and find where that might be.
You knew you needed to go, you just didn't know how.
Exactly. So I moved into his office, and I was like, everyone in the company, nobody knew who I was or what I was doing there.
This random guy just shows up.
This random guy in an office space, and I was just there, and I was doing my own thing. And so David and I would, talk, and we'd go on walks in the morning and talk real estate. And he ended up giving me the idea of like, and I didn't even end up doing any real estate deals with him. He just became like a mentor figure for me. And he gave me the idea of looking for multi-tenant, small bay business parks. And those are essentially industrial sites that have, multiple tenants. So You have like a 100,000 square foot building that's broken up into 1,500 square foot tenants. And you'll have small office, warehouse, and bathroom. And so that can be like HVAC companies, plumbing, roofing companies, e-commerce companies, like, all different types of small businesses occupy those spaces. So I started looking, and I already had the industrial experience, at least on a very basic level on the smaller industrial sites that I bought. And so I started looking for a whale, I started whale hunting.
Yeah.
Which is what I wanted to do the whole time, once I got to a point with the notes, which is where I was. And
because you could live off the money from the notes.
Yeah.
So you didn't need a deal to make life happen.
Right. So I just started, and my life is pretty simple. My costs are pretty low, and
no furniture or anything in the
no
fridge.
Furniture, yeah, not even food in the fridge, and just some ramen noodles and very basic stuff. But
living off deals.
So I started whale hunting. I found a deal. Actually, it's the Hobby Business Park, and so that was my first like bigger deal. And 100,000 square foot site, like 70 tenants, and so that was like the deal that really shifted my business and shifted the way I was doing things, because it checked a lot of those boxes. I mean, so I guess I'll talk through kind of how that deal.
Yeah, let's get all the details. Like, so how many square feet was it?
100,000.
100,000. Wow.
Yeah. So cold called him. He was in Dubai. I mean, I remember the call perfectly. I mean, and talked to him for a while. Felt good about it, and then after that call, couldn't get in touch with him. Emailed him again, kept emailing him, and then I was actually in Dallas. Craig Couch? Craig,
no, I don't know.
He does seller financing. Craig, maybe I'm pronouncing his last name incorrectly.
Is he seller financing Craig? Is that his name?
Yeah, well, but I was in Dallas meeting with him,
okay,
just trying to get some advice on like. I was thinking about scaling my seller financing business, and he was saying, you should really I like the path that you were focused on with industrial. Like, you probably should just stay there. Like, it's good that you have these notes together, but should focus there. And right after that meeting, this seller called me, the one from Hobby, who had been ghosting me, and coincidentally, right after that meeting. And so I was in Fort Worth, and he said, can you be here? And it was I checked my maps, and I couldn't even be there in that time, but I just went as fast as I could.
So he asked you to get there that day?
Yeah, to meet me. It was in the evening for coffee.
And so you're in Dallas, and he asked you to drive down to Houston.
I was coming back, but it was a rushed drive.
Okay.
To meet him at the Dot coffee shop off 45 in Airport.
Within how long?
I don't remember the exact time constraints, but I shouldn't have been able to get there in time, but I did. And so got there, met with him, talked to him for about 2 hours, thought I had a deal. And then at the very end, he said, I have a staff of 40 years who does, one guy does maintenance, the other one does management. They've worked with me for 40 years. If anything were to happen to them, then I would be a seller. And I could tell that it wasn't a price thing. I could tell he was genuine about it. So it was stay in touch. It was really nice meeting you. And, if anything happens, we'll kind of be in touch type of deal, which was not what I wanted. And so the next day I'm on this really long walk, which was kind of my thinking time. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to send an email, and I'm going to address his main concerns. So I put in there a price that would be, I was like, if I can get this price, this would be incredible. It was it's creating my dream scenario, manifesting it in an email. So I put the price, I put the option period, I put the due diligence, and I also put in there, I'd be open to keeping your staff for 40 years. Next day he calls me, he calls me and he says, well, do you want to meet again at the Dot? And at this point I'm like, this guy's just teasing me. He wants to spend another 2 hours with me and then tell me to follow up in 2 years.
He really likes the coffee there.
Yeah, so
they have good pancakes at the Dot.
Right. So he's sitting down with me, and we're talking there, and he says, well, your comment, or you figured out my main concern. These brokers, people have come to me, people have made offers. It's not about the money for me. I don't want to have my staff of 40 years fired tomorrow. So if you'd be open to keeping them, that would mean a lot to me. I'll sell you it for this price. Can you put this much money together? And in the worst negotiation tactic of my life, I jump out of my seat and say yes. I smile from ear to ear. Which if he wanted to get more money out of me, he totally could have. Right. It was not a good negotiation strategy, but I also had no way of putting that much money together. So
how much money was it?
$6 million.
$6 million.
Yeah. And this is
buying it for?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is going from significantly smaller deals. Up until that point, the biggest purchase that I'd made was 1.7.
Okay.
So it's quite a jump.
What was the biggest one before the 1.7?
475.
Okay, so you made a huge jump from 1.
It's a big jump. Yeah.
Yeah, you're making leapfrogs.
And at the same time, I kind of went into this business with the mentality of not having traditional limited partners, which started with kind of my private money on the land and then private money on the warehouses and just creating value and refinancing. It was kind of it wasn't a strategy that I initially wanted to. It was one I kind of fell into by happenstance of not qualifying for loans when I first started. And so then the question became, how do I finance this? And I was looking at doing a $6 million hard money loan, which is absolutely what you should never do on a deal like that. So I had enough people around me tell me that I was an absolute lunatic to the point where I was scared enough, rightfully so, to do that. So I ended up meeting with him again, and it was right when Silicon Valley Bank went down.
At the same time?
Yeah, it was the same time. So I met with him, and I was like, I'm sorry, with everything that's going on at Silicon Valley Bank, some of my investors are in tech and et cetera, I'm going to need you to finance it. Otherwise, I can't do it. And this is all I can come up with right now. And so it was between...
So how much did you tell him you could come up with?
So it was 1.5.
You came up with 1.5?
Right. So
okay.
And that came from one of my private lenders who had been giving me collateralized loans, gave me it as preferred equity.
Okay.
So that was kind of my segue into the next element of my business, which I'll expand on in terms of structure. But that got me into the deal. He financed it at 4% interest only. And so when I bought it, the in-place income, it was bringing about $23,000 a month. Now I have it at a little over $110,000 a month.
Wow.
And I converted everything to triple net. So that's $110 on a gross basis. It's about $80,000 net.
Okay.
But my payments to him are minimal. And it's just been...
How much was your payment to him every month at that time?
$15,000.
$15,000.
Yeah.
So he was doing 23 gross, and you were saying, I'll take over all the headaches, the management, everything. I'll keep your staff, and I'll insure you 15.
Right.
That's a no-brainer for him.
Right. So, and it still is 15. So I'm still paying him 15.
You're still paying him.
Yeah.
So I have a back part of this story that I can tell. So Jake and I went to lunch the day that he was going to go meet with this guy.
Yep.
And he was telling me about this deal. And he was so pumped, but so anxious about pitching him the idea of doing owner finance.
Right.
What was going through your head at that time? Because you had told him, I'm going to put this money together.
Yeah.
And then you had to renegotiate of hey, I need you to finance it.
Right. One, I knew it was such a good opportunity, and I'd invested so much time into building the relationship that I was concerned he would, you never know how a seller is going to react in those kind of situations. They could get super pissed off, tell you that you've wasted their time, that you misrepresented yourself, et cetera, which of course is what, I was thinking he would do. Part of my brain was thinking that. The other part just was trying to be really optimistic and thinking, well, the worst thing he's most likely going to say is just no without getting too upset. And so I was definitely nervous about it. But I remember just the split second, right after I said it, I just wanted to see exactly how he would react. And he was pretty calm about it. I was like, all right, this is going well, going better than I expected.
There's kind of some upside for him in it, in the sense of he's getting interest income as well.
Right. And the big thing for him is he wasn't having to pay capital gains. He bought it in the 80s. So.
Oh, wow, he bought it for nothing.
Yeah, no, he bought it for nothing.
It was a win-win all the way around. That's crazy, man. So that was a huge leapfrog in your
so that was a
career.
So I doubled the value of that place.
How long did that take you operationally when you took it over?
About a year.
Okay, that's a great turnaround.
Yeah.
Did you fire his people already?
So yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah. So they stayed on for a year.
He retired them. He didn't fire them. He retired.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where like they weren't, they were really nice people, but there wasn't exactly a fit, I should say.
You were just paying.
They stayed
payroll
for
to
a year,
payroll.
and I just added it to the purchase price. I was like, okay, this is how much I'm going to pay them for the year. If they took off and went to Mexico, like this deal would still work. So
you didn't care what they were doing.
they went on vacation. Like it didn't matter.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I love that. Good for you, man. So you take it, and it took you that long, basically a year to turn it around.
Yeah,
and you went from $23,000 a month gross to 110 gross
on a gross basis. But I converted everything to triple net, which was a big part of the value creation and the management.
Can you walk us through like what that is for people who don't know what triple net is?
Yeah, so triple net, it can vary depending on a few semantics, but for the most part, it's taxes, insurance, even management and all operating expenditures are grouped together in triple net. And then, so the property is 100,000 square feet, and it's divvied up on a pro rata basis. So if you take 1,000 square feet, you take essentially 1% of those triple net amounts. So similar to like on a mortgage payment, when you escrow taxes and insurance, the triple net's very much it's an escrow.
Okay.
So at the end of the year, I have to show my accounting to the tenants and show like if there's any excess of funds that I've collected, I have to give it back
and
distribute it. Yeah. The biggest thing for an operator is not being responsible for anything inside of the units, and for banks and lending purposes as well, because then if there's your cash flow becomes a lot more predictable.
That's where your risk is too. You don't know what's
right. So
happen.
That's where the difference between a house and industrial, or multifamily in a business park, because you don't have the what ifs of, toilet not flushing or ceiling tiles that are not to the tenants.
For sure. Whatever happens.
Sheetrock, yeah.
So growing it to that size in a year, you had a preferred equity partner of $1.5 million. You financed the rest from the seller.
Yeah.
What did you have to do to operate so you went to triple net. What did you have to do CapEx wise to kind of get it up to speed?
So CapEx wise, I was the contractor, and I was the everything over there for a while, just because it was so much bigger than anything that I dealt with. That
you lived there.
I office there. Yeah, I office there, live there. I got out of real estate pretty much for a year, for all intents and purposes, just to operate it, because I hadn't, and it was a good decision because there's a part of my brain that always wants to just go hunt the next thing. And I think by immersing myself in the conundrum of what it was like the only way for me to like truly understand the position I was in, which was I had a park that was 50% vacant. There were prostitutes there. It was the whole 9 yards. And like you can't just take an asset like that and think you won, because you didn't really win anything at that point. You got the entry to the arena.
You bought your project.
Right. So now I had to take on the project. And so the biggest thing they did there, they didn't have any online marketing. And so it wasn't being marketed anywhere, I should say. And the units they weren't rehabbed. He didn't put any money into them. So they weren't even marketable. So a big part of it was just cleaning up the place. I gated it, painted the exterior, pressure washed, parking lines, everything that was really, and gating was one of the best decisions just because you add value to all the tenants, and it's a one-time capital expense. Waterproofed it, started redoing the units, online marketing, and bringing in higher caliber of tenant. Yeah.
How much money did you have to put into like?
So I also use the cash flow from it to do a lot of the fixing up.
Did you?
Yeah. So that was, it was a slower process. It sounds like 1 year sounds quick, but at the time I was like, okay, I'd fix up this unit, fix up this one, do them in like pairs of 4 or 5, and then build up some reserves.
Were you doing the work yourself?
Not like me with a hammer, but like me oversee. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had like, a painter, carpenter, a few of them have like little races and competitions between a few like subs and see who can finish them quickest. And but yeah.
So you were very hand to mouth on that project. So you get some cash flow in, you literally plug it back in to the business immediately.
Yeah. And then I also learned what didn't work there, which was hiring a broker to lease the place. Because the units are so small, there's not really it's not that there's not an incentive. The incentive's not big enough to get their attention. So you end up with either someone really low on the totem pole who doesn't really pay attention to it. It doesn't end up being anyone's priority. And so as a result, the property suffers from an attention standpoint. I gave it, and I didn't know that initially. I gave it to a broker to lease it. Nothing was being leased. You show up a lot of times and like tenants don't show up and you have to drive 20 minutes across town to get there. And it's like, so a lot of brokers don't like these kind of assets. And so
brokers want to lease 40,000.
Right. So you have to go into this and understand, like, you have to do it in-house. And at the very least, you have to have a management company that's small enough and who is actually going to listen to you and like do things, a certain way. Because if you just give it to third parties and disappear, you're not going to get the results that you want.
So did you lease it up yourself?
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's awesome though. Yeah. I mean, you lived that thing for a whole year.
Yeah, no. And then when I just did another one and another business park, and I haven't been involved on a personal level just because I've been able to, outline the systems that need to be done.
You did it before you know what needs to happen. So on the first one, how much value did you increase, or how much equity
$6 million.
You increased it by $6 million.
Yeah.
So doubled the value. So you bought it for $6 million and now it's worth $12 million.
Yeah.
Wow. In 1 year.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so the thing with the business parks, they're great. And like once you turn them around, there's great cash flow. They're pink dinosaurs and there aren't that many of them, like sizable business parks. Brokers call on them like crazy. They stick out. It's not just like, houses, you have a ton of houses. So, you can cold call houses and, you'll find, there are enough of them to where you can play the volume game.
For sure.
The business parks, if you're looking for stuff that's, ownership bought it in the 80s and hasn't done anything, like there are only so many of those that you can really turn around like that. And they're really hands-on. So that's what led me to focusing on single-tenant outdoor storage.
Yeah. Because
those sites are very much the antithesis. Those are, your time is spent putting together the deal, and then they're pretty hands-off. So my game plan was, let me focus on finding business parks and taking down one of them at a time, and then I can stack up these outdoor storage sites simultaneously.
Yeah.
Because those involve, time, putting them together and structuring the deal. But then once they're done, you just kind of can stack them up.
Man, I love this. I hate that we've spent so much time because now we're like 3 minutes away from being done with our show. And we barely are getting to the single tenant. We're going to have to bring you back on for another show, dude, to talk about single tenant. Because I think there's a lot of value here. Give us the 30-second overview of what a single-tenant outdoor storage.
30-second overview, single-tenant sites, somewhere between $1 and $4 million on average. These are sites that you probably see on the side of the highway all the time. United Rentals, Sunbelt Rentals, where there's a warehouse, and then there's about, a warehouse that's 10 to 30,000 square feet, about 2 to 10 acres of land stabilized with crushed concrete. Usually you'll have a company that has, equipment rentals, bulk material storage, truck yards, with a warehouse where they need their employees to be able to store some stuff in the warehouse, have some people officing inside. And, those deals really fall under the radar. And I see there being a really good opportunity for especially residential realtors to kind of grab hold of that because they're mom and pop ownership, a lot of them. You're dealing with companies that have, whether it's a trucking company that's been there 30 years, that's, winding down and looking to sell their asset. There are a lot of those, boomers that are kind of moving out, retiring, and they have these assets and they're not institutional. They're not high enough and they can become institutional once you package them together. But on a one-off basis, the deal sizes are small enough to where they're in the residential arena.
They're calling their
right.
realtor.
So
they know.
What I'm looking to do is pay residential realtors 4% commission, represent me on the buy side. I pay the seller's commission. and, get into the asset class that way.
You hear that, realtors? If you're watching the show, you need to be hitting up Jake Stein.
And wholesalers as well.
Yep,
so.
I love it. Jake, how do people get a hold of you?
So, you can give my email. So my email is jstein@880ventures.net. I don't know if people give their phone numbers on the phone.
Yeah, you can, for sure.
Yeah, so my number is 713-878-7093. Again, it's 713-878-7093. I get enough spam calls, so might as well get it right.
I don't think you'll get too many spam calls from here.
Yeah.
Well, man, I think if you're a wholesaler out there, or if you're a realtor that really comes across one of these deals and doesn't know what to do, Jake is the first person I always call. This guy knows this through and through. There's nobody else that I've talked to in our space that knows it as well as Jake does. He lived and breathed it for a year, like we're talking about. But man, thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me.
We're going to have you back on so you can tell us more about this.